Now, I want to be really clear. What I am showing you is still very much under development. The basic elements are likely to remain the same, but some of the presentation will almost certainly change between now and when it's released. As the folks up at OpenText like to say, if it were finished, right, it wouldn't be it wouldn't be going through its beta process still. That said, if you are seeing things and you've got some ideas or recommendations, I'm glad to take those back. Feel free to send me an email at the end of this session or put those things in the chat. So if you're seeing things that you like or things that you think could be improved on, absolutely feel free to mention it. Right now, they're doing a lot of usability testing, and they're really wiring up the user interface parts. It also means that as I'm going through, we may encounter some things that don't work quite right. So please, just know that going in. The login window here, this is one of the things that will change. For the production release, there's not going to be a prompt for settings or server information. This is really just part of the beta so that we can point our web services at multiple servers. But I'm going to log in right now. And I am logging into a real, live FirstClass server. Oh, I need to actually let's try this. Try the right password this time. All right, and here it is. And just to give you a quick overview, what you'll notice first of all is we've got a couple different sections here. There is an area up here in the top right where I've got really my own personal information. And I can come in here. Well, actually, I'll demonstrate these things in a minute. But basically, this is my personal information where I can update my preferences and my profile. And I've got my logout widget, just like you're probably used to on a lot of web-based services today. Along the left, I have really my personal information tools. These are all my personal productivity tools. So I've got my mailbox and a calendar and my personal workspaces, drafts and contacts and so forth. And again, we'll dig into these in a little bit more detail in just a minute. In the middle, we have all of our collaboration tools, and this should look familiar to you. One thing that you'll notice is that I do have things that are traditional FirstClass conferences sitting alongside what we used to call communities. So all of that is brought together, and I'll drill down a little more into that in a moment. And then all of the social content is over here on the right. And these are features that were only available previously through the communities interface. So they've taken, again, the best of this notion of communities where I can have people that I'm following in my watched items and our system-wide pulse, and all of that is now available as well through a single experience. And then last, along the bottom, you'll notice that we have some apps. And this is where we can build web apps that we deliver through FirstClass. And I'll show you these as well. These are just two sample apps that we have in here right now. What's cool about these apps is that they are built using industry standard web development tools. You don't need to know a thing about FirstClass to build an app that you deliver through FirstClass now, which is really quite nice and quite different than the way it has been. So let me focus a little bit deeper on each of these. So starting up here with personal preferences, one of the things that you'll notice is that we've got a profile here with a profile picture. There's this link here where I can do a quick status update. So glad it is Friday afternoon. All right, so there's what I want to share with everybody, and I've just updated essentially my status. Just as was the case before, so anybody who's following me, right, would know now that I'm glad it's Friday afternoon. They see that right away, and this gets pushed into the pulse and so forth. But it gives us that internal kind of microblogging feature. And then we also have the ability to do things like update a profile. And this is another of those things that I'm really glad that they carried through from the social tools. We have had within FirstClass this notion of a resume for a long time. In some organizations, it's widely used. In others, it's not. But the challenge with it has always been that it is hidden. That is not me, by the way. But who wouldn't want to be George Clooney? So anyway, we can set up a profile, and it allows us to put a little bit of information. These forms can be modified. Right now, it says company and position. That may or may not be relevant for your user group, and so there is going to be a forms engine where we can go in and modify these things. But what's nice about this idea of the web profile is that this does follow us. It's a little bit more exposed than it is through a traditional mail client, so that when people post things, you've got that photo right there next to them, and it does personalize the experience a little bit. And then we've got in here as well some things like preferences, and I can go in and reskin this. So instead of the FirstClass theme, if I want to use lightness, I can change all of that. We have not yet seen all of the tools that will allow us to customize this. We will, obviously, there are places here where they've set up a spot for branding, like in the corner where you can put in your own logo. And I do expect that we will be able to define our own skins. We haven't seen all the tools for that yet, but you will be able to do some branding of the environment as well, so it will continue to reflect your organization. So those are the personal preferences. Again, if there are any questions about the components that I'm showing, feel free to put those into the chat. Next, I'm going to turn to mail. And one of the things that you'll notice right away, actually, which is really nice in terms of the personal productivity, is that they've tried to expose a little bit more information right up top. So as soon as I log in, it shows me some of my my top unread items. And it gives me that filtered list of just unread items in this quick little widget here in the corner. I can also, of course, go in and look at my full mailbox. And this is a sample account. We've just been pushing a bunch of junk mail into it from, we've got basically a spam address that we use that we get junk mail to. And so here's one of our messages. One of the things that is nice about this, of course, is we're in a browser. So it shows up and I see the full HTML right here. What's really cool, and again, those of you that have been working in FirstClass and struggling with the way HTML mail is dealt with and so forth, what's nice about this is that, yes, here's an HTML message. When I come in and I respond to it, and I'll go ahead and reply with quote. When I respond to it now, oh, this is interesting. Haha. I mentioned that this is all under development. This is something that, well, okay, at any rate, this is something that is brand new. It popped up my new message here in a new message window. And what you'll notice is that that original HTML is actually all available to me. So we're no longer losing the formatting of all that content. So I can come in here and I can say whatever, thanks for sending me this great offer, right? And they've implemented things like the directory. So if I want to send this to Kirsty, she's getting used to me sending her a bunch of garbage, but I've got the internal directory right here, right? So I can find her name. Maybe I don't want to send it back to mail it on sale or whatever I need to do. But they've done a nice job with this. When I'm ready to send it, I just hit send and we're good to go. And of course, all of this is happening in real time on the server, just as if I were connected with the client. So. And I've got a couple questions here. What are printed messages going to look like? That is a good question. I don't have an answer for that yet. I'm not sure what the printing is going to look like. I'm expecting that we're going to be able to pop these things out in a simple window so we don't get all of the surrounding pieces, but I haven't seen it yet. There's another question here about the apps. Let me hold on to that until we get to the application section, but I'll address that. Let's see here. We've got another question here about the organization of the to-line and the from-line, to-line and the subject line. That actually came up in the product launch, and I think that's good feedback. Right now, they're using the sort of first-class format of the message where the subject is at the top, and a lot of people are used to that being reversed. I do expect that we're going to have some flexibility to customize that. But again, in this beta, this is the way they've put it together so far. So. Some other things that are important when it comes to mail, they have implemented features like the message history, which is of course important. So all of that is carried through already, and we can get into the message history. They've wired that up. We have the ability as well to toggle an unread flag and put a red dot back on this. And even some new things like add to watch list, which I'll show you in a little while when we get to the social tools. So the basic tools are actually pretty nice. I should mention also that the editor, if I go ahead and create a new message here, they've done a pretty good job with the web editor as well. So, as I'm coming in here and putting in content, I can control fonts and styles and, all of that. They've got some good built-in styles. It supports tables. I can insert graphics and do all of those things. Because we are in a browser, there's a special button here for pasting in from Word and from other applications. But overall, it does a pretty nice job. It's a pretty easy experience to work with. So that is, that's not everything for mail. There's one other really important piece. In FirstClass and in the client, we are in the habit of being able to do things like drag and drop or select multiple items. And that is also something that has been implemented. So if let me come out of my new message, but if I'm trying to file things in my mailbox, right, I can highlight multiple items. I can shift click and do that. And I even have the ability to take these and drag right here into my folders, and I can drop this into folder 1, and we're good to go. So drag and drop is one of those things that they have actually worked pretty hard to get in here, so that we don't lose that sort of convenience in terms of the overall experience. Another sort of interesting thing that they've done, you've noticed that the folders here, right, they pop up in their own modal window. One of the things that we've gotten used to in FirstClass is often we'll have several windows open. We set things up side by side so we can move around. And they recognized pretty early on that in a web browser, in a single window interface, it's important to be able to get around there also, because I might be working on a message in my mailbox, and then I might go into my calendar, and then I might have to go back to my mailbox. Well, how are we going to do that? So there's been an interesting thing up here on the toolbar. You'll notice there's this Recent Places widget, and it allows me to very easily go back. So if I was in my mailbox, and then I jump into a conference or community, and then I need to go back to my mailbox, it's right here, and I have a quick way of getting to it. And I can even drag and drop to those recent places. So they've done a good job of sort of easing the navigation. And of course, on the left, I've always sort of got my breadcrumbs. So if I'm drilling down into folders, I can easily go back to previous objects. So that is drag and drop attachments. I believe it is supposed to work. I haven't tried it. Let's give it a shot. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new message here. And there is my message, and here is an attachment. And look at that, it just works. Yes, drag and drop attachments has been wired up already. So I expect if microphones were on, there would be cheering in the background right now. Hopefully there is cheering in the background. All right. Taking a look next at calendar. Again, one of the nice things that they've done is they've exposed that calendar at a glance. So as I'm looking here, I can see right here's my month view. The dates with the alternate shading, right? In this case, the orange dates in this skin. These are dates when I have things booked. And of course, it shows me at a glance some things that I have on my calendar today, RWD presentation, webinar, etc. So I've got that at a glance view. But I can also jump into the full calendar view. And here's my week view, pretty much, as you would expect. And there are month views and day views and so forth. One of the things that they have wired in already is the ability to do punch throughs. So I can come in, and if I've got, whether this is, the professional development calendar or the all staff calendar, whatever it is, I can punch through additional calendars. And obviously this one is a little bit busy. Maybe we'll go to a day view on that. And now I've punched through all of the events from that other calendar, so I get that single view to all of it. And again, it all just kind of works the way you would expect it to, which is nice. There's also a tab here. The tasks are brought through as well, and I can go through and check these things off as I go. So the calendars and tasks and so forth are all pretty well wired up at this point, and fairly straightforward. Again, if there are any questions here. Here we go. This will all be available on my Galaxy Tabs browser. So the calendar will be accessible. Absolutely. Yes. Question here about how the reminders work. The reminders should work the same way they always have. I don't think they're making any changes to the reminders. So if you are logged in when the reminder comes in, I believe it sends an email to you. If you are not connected when the reminder comes due, then oh, excuse me. I guess the question is, what do we do for the pop-up? You know what? That's a good question. So David had asked what's going to happen with the reminders. This is Web 2.0, and there is dynamic content. When somebody invites you into a chat, that pops up in real time. And when new messages come in, if I'm in my mailbox and a new message comes in, that new message is displayed in real time. I don't have to do a refresh. So I expect that when a reminder comes around, that will be dynamic content that will show up in real time if I'm logged in. But it's not something I've seen to test yet, so that we'll have to check on that. There's also a question here, can we set a schedule for tasks for things like repeating events? Absolutely. All of the scheduling functionality that is part of calendars today, we expect that to be exposed through the web interface. I have not checked to see if that is part of the detail form yet. Let's try this. And again, this is beta. I have not actually tested this. But let's see, when I bring up a new event, here's what we get. Okay, and that looks pretty familiar, right? Event description, location, and here are our repeat options, and I can say repeat by week. Yeah, so it looks like they have implemented that. So all that stuff is here. You'll notice we've got our tab for reminders, we've got our event details and so forth. So looks like they've done a pretty good job. I'm not going to go ahead and not going to save that one. All right, great. All right. So those are calendars. Let me also comment on this because this is a little bit different. One of the interesting things that some folks noticed about the social tools is in the FirstClass communities interface, when you were wanting to create content, if you say wanted to begin drafting a wiki but didn't want to expose it to everybody yet, there wasn't actually a way to do that. You had to either create it in place, or if you started a draft and didn't post it, it was just gone. So one of the things that they have implemented in 12 is this notion of drafts. And drafts is going to be a container where not only will partially created mail messages be, those will also be in your mailbox, but we can also do a draft of a wiki or a blog post or other kinds of content so that we don't necessarily have to go back to a mailbox to find those things. So the notion of drafts as one of the new personal workspace tools is going to be introduced. We also have the ability to come in here and get to our contacts, of course. This has not all been wired up. Obviously, the user interface here is not complete, but it will allow us to create our contacts and have contact containers just like we do inside the client. And then for existing sites, if you've already deployed containers for file storage and for documents, those containers continue to work as they have. For a brand new setup, they've actually combined these, and I think they just call it file storage. And the idea behind it, the reason they're combining them is that having two separate containers has just confused most people anyway. They don't understand the difference. But this provides a personal place where we can create a document, perhaps like you would use Evernote, or we can upload files so we don't have to carry them around on flash drives. And again, they've implemented things like drag and drop for this, so I can drag my photo in here, and it uploads, and there it is in real time. And we've got the little preview in the next window, and all that just works. And this can be used for files of any type, which is really quite nice. And again, if we happen to have WebDev compliant files in here, we can open those up and edit them and save them right back into the server from here. So these are some of the personal workspace tools. Any questions about that? Oh, as I'm looking back at the questions, there's a question here about tasks. I know that repeating tasks is something that has been requested, if there's something you're trying to get in. I don't know if that is part of 12 or not. So I'll say this in terms of expansion of feature set. I know that where the engineers are right now is they want to get the 12 interface hooked up and doing basically everything that they've spec'd out so that we're not losing any functionality or so that all of the targeted functionality works. I expect that 12.1 is where we're likely to see the next round of enhancements or additional features. So as a general rule, what I would say is if it's not something you can do in the client today, it's unlikely that it will be introduced. That's not to say it absolutely won't, but I think it's unlikely we'll see it in 12.0. I expect 12.1 is where we're going to see a lot of those kinds of enhancements. All right. So those are personal workspaces. Let me talk a little bit about the collaboration areas here. And some of this is still being wired up. But one of the things that you'll notice, right, in the middle of my desktop, I have my communities and conferences. One of the things that is going to happen with 12 is when I create a new object from here, they're essentially combining these two objects. And the name that they have been using is collaborative container. So instead of having some conferences and some communities, we all just have collaborative containers now. Functionally, the collaborative container is going to support all of the things that a community can do. My understanding is that we won't necessarily have to have all three. So those of you that have worked in the communities interface know that when you enter a community, you have a combination of a feed, which works like a discussion board where you can post messages and have conversation. And then it has a separate tab right now for your documents, and then a third tab for wikis. We will be able to do all three of those things in any collaborative container, but we don't necessarily have to do all three in every collaborative container. And again, one of the nice things that we can do now in the wikis is we will have co-authoring of documents, real-time co-authoring of documents. So in this interface, again, whether it's a community or a conference, or historically community or conference, it all is available to me, and I can jump in. Now, this is part of the user interface that I don't have the updated version yet. So right now, all we're seeing is the discussion part. What would be the feed? One of the things that they've done here, though, that's quite nice is by default, right, it just sort of presents everything, but they recognize that you might have 30 items on your desktop and not all of them are of equal value. So I can take the things that are most important to me and drag these up as favorites, essentially pin them up to the top. If tech class isn't as important to me anymore, I drag that one down, and it does give me the ability, therefore, to sort of arrange my desktop. So that is what the communities are going to look like. We've talked about the editor already. I'm just looking at some notes here. Let's switch over here to the right and talk a little bit about the social tools. And again, these are components that were available in communities, and now they're bringing them into the core FirstClass experience. So one of the things, of course, is that everybody's got a profile. People can have their own personal blogs as well. The blog detail isn't wired up yet, so I don't have a good way to show that just at this point. In addition to being able to follow people, it's also right showing me 2 people are online, and when somebody is online, we're going to get a green dot next to their name. So this notion of people that I might want to follow and I can initiate a chat, it's all right here. The chat component, any chats that I have going on show up here. And what they've done is they've implemented this not unlike instant messaging on your phone, right? So when I open this up, I can see sort of my history of whatever chat has happened before. Really need to get a calendar with the right days. So I sent out an email. Not everybody may have seen this, but I sent out an email a couple days ago that advertised today's webinar as February 31st, which is a bit of a challenge. So anyway, but it allows us to go ahead and push this content out. Now, if the person I'm chatting with is online, they get a pop-up in real time. If they're not online, the next time they log in, it's going to notify them. So again, the idea that I can leave this really simple, quick, lightweight message for somebody without having to draft a full-featured email is kind of nice. We can do that quick back and forth in real time if need be. So that would be the chat component. The watched items, I want to touch on this also. So the idea with watched items is there are times when you maybe have posted something to a collaborative container, and you're not necessarily interested in everything that's happening in that container, but you want to know if somebody's responded to your particular issue. Or maybe there's a wiki that you've created, and if somebody else edits it, you want to know when somebody's edited that item. So the idea with watched items is that I can go into my mailbox, I can go into a community, I can go into any kind of space, and if this particular thread is interesting to me, I would say add this to my watch list. I don't know if this is wired up, but we'll try it. It looks like it's not. Right, what will happen is that item then shows up under my watched items list. And as it gets updated, I'm going to see a little red dot here, a little red counter, just as I do for things on my desktop. So that as soon as somebody has responded to my question, I now see that in my watched items and I can jump straight to that particular thread. So it's a really quite useful tool that for me at least, I'm going to be pleased to have this available across all of FirstClass. But that's going to be a nice piece. And then down here at the bottom, the pulse, again, this is a carryover from the social media tools from FirstClass communities. The idea here is that as people update their status, we can aggregate all that into a single feed, sort of like a big Twitter feed for your organization. And I can scroll through, I can filter this and say, just show me the people that I'm following, or just show me my own posts, and we can filter that down. But that idea that as people are updating their status, we have one central place to see all the status updates is also implemented here. So any questions on the social tools? Okay, let's talk about apps then. I want to talk about apps and the API. Oh, wait, we've got a social question here. So is the right-hand area for social networking going to be hidden as per groups? That's a good question. I do expect that we're going to have the ability to control the, when we talk about the modular layout, I do expect we're going to have some ability to control these objects. I don't know what it's going to look like. I'm guessing from your question that you may have some people for whom you don't want to expose this portion. So I don't know how we're going to achieve it. I expect though that should be customizable. Let me say this also though. I do understand concern about not wanting people within an organization to get on Facebook and Twitter and use sort of public unregulated services. I would suggest that the ability to have an internal profile as part of your internal messaging system is actually a pretty powerful capability. When we're thinking in the context of schools, we're always talking about how do we get kids to use next generation tools and the technology that they're going to need in the workforce, but do it in a controlled, safe way where there is appropriate oversight, but also give them the freedom to use these tools. And I think because they're in first class, the status updates that they're posting aren't being posted to the whole world. It's no different than allowing them to send an email to somebody. So we're really not opening up anything new or dangerous or risky. We're just giving them some slightly more updated tools that have real world analogs that they can work with. So the notion of having a profile picture, being able to update a status, I see as in many ways sort of a natural extension, an evolution of having an intranet environment of any sort. So as you're talking about this and presenting it, I would encourage you to at least present that perspective, that we're not talking about opening up social media to everybody in the organization. What we're talking about is bringing some social elements into our intranet site, for what it's worth. So there's my stump speech on that. Let me switch gears and talk about apps here. Oh, and okay, actually, more concerned about the corporate world with a multi-tenant system. Okay, good question. So multi-tenant systems, again, these are some of the details that we don't have full access to, but I know that we have set up multi-tenant environments today that utilize communities, and we can completely segment those communities. So the My People list, the chats, the pulse, all of that is specific to the individual tenant site in communities today, and I expect that to be carried through. So we shouldn't have an issue with one company's data bleeding over into another through the social tools. All right. As for apps, let me first show you some of the sample apps that are here. And these are two sample apps that Stuart Lynch from OpenText coded up. What's cool about these is that they were built just using the API for whatever the service is. So for the Flickr app, basically Stuart used JavaScript and CSS in the Flickr API, and he built this little widget. And when it comes up, being on the internet, right, we all know that all people do on the internet is they look for cute cats. So we'll do a search on Flickr for cats. Oh, an angry cat comes up, of course. All right, so here are our top 5 cute cats when we do the Flickr search. What's cool about this is without leaving the first class world, right, we're able to bring up this widget, we send a query out to Flickr, and it returns some data that we can parse and present right inside first class. Similarly, this other widget Stuart built, and he built it specifically to look at the first class YouTube channel where we can go in and we can say, okay, go ahead and show us our bookmarks videos, and here's how to manually create bookmarks, and it goes out and retrieves that content for us. He has also built some other apps, and I don't have them on this server, but he actually did build proof of concept for a Facebook app. And what's cool about that one is that it actually allows us, the first time it pops up, it does prompt you for a username and password. And then once you've authenticated, it stores that token in your first class account so that the next time you go and you click on the app, it just brings you right in. And in his sample app, he exposes just a couple things, I think status update and something from your wall. But once you have that API and you can build this thing, you can really reach out to anything at all. What's cool about this as well is, like I was saying, these are applications that are built using JavaScript and HTML and whatever the target site API is. So you don't need to know a thing about first class development. It doesn't really matter that you're deploying it in first class. And you can get anybody with those skills, with JavaSet and the ability to execute a JSON query or use SOAP or whatever the protocols are that you need on the other end. So if you've got work study students, if you've got anybody that's been doing web development in the last 3 to 5 years, they can help you to build these apps. One of the things that I'm excited about is the idea that the application marketplace, which up until now has been really restricted to developers, as Aptiris, we've built a bunch of applications that work in the client environment, but it's a pretty specialized skill set. I'm actually really excited that we could now have thousands of people developing applications or adapting existing web applications for FirstClass that we can now deploy. And the way these will get deployed, these can be deployed on a group basis. We're going to be able to essentially push things to a model desktop that determine what apps are visible to you. So we might have some people in an organization who get certain apps and other people that don't. Or on a multi-tenant system, they might get totally different versions of these apps. One question that I did see scrolling through the chat was what's going to happen with FCAS applications? So applications that were built for the client today, how are those going to work? And the short answer is we're going to have to wait to be absolutely sure. But what is happening right now, and this is actually relevant for those of you that have custom forms, right now in order to interact with any kind of application or any kind of custom form, we have to have an HTML representation of it. And so one of the pieces that the developers are working on right now is an updated designer that is going to allow us to take existing forms, whether they're RAD application forms or static forms, mail forms, custom documents, etc. And it's going to generate HTML for us that will work inside the new FirstClass 12 interface. We may have to do some prettying up of that. But the first step is for us to get our hands on that newer designer so that we can adapt those things for the new FirstClass 12 web interface. There are hooks in FirstClass 12 that should allow us to get data back to something like application services. But it is my expectation that because web browsers handle things like mouse clicks differently than the client does, that there may have to be some adjustments to that. So I don't expect that existing FCAS applications are just going to fire up within FirstClass 12 right away. But it does look like the wiring is being put in place that should allow us to build a web front end to those same applications. And if we want to continue building things in application services, we can. The other piece to that question is that with the ability to build web applications now and to use industry standard tools, I know that for myself, we have shifted a lot of our development to building web-based applications. So things like we have a ticketing help desk application that we released as a client-based application, I guess almost 10 years ago. And about 2 years ago, we rolled out a web version of that happens to run on Apache. And so one of the things that we're starting work on already is basically a launch point for the web version of that application. Because to me, I would much rather be writing web apps these days than writing things that are client specific. So if you are writing your own web apps, this becomes a very easy way to deploy them. And I would suggest that if you're looking at doing new development, this is a good place to do it. We've got a question here as well. Can we use already existing APIs from our schoolbook editors? Import an SC12. So just to clarify, are you looking to pull information from your student information and present it inside FirstClass, or are you looking to go the other way, take FirstClass data and push it into your student information system? And I'm assuming there's some typing happening on the other end here while we wait. Let's see what I'm not getting an answer back. So let me answer this both ways. Okay, student has to log in to enter the program. So yeah, so one thing that depending on how you can authenticate to your gradebook or to your student information system, one option would be to build a web app that shows up as an icon right here. And if your gradebook, for example, allows OAuth as a method of authentication, that's already wired up. And so we could build a little widget here that has some JavaScript and does the OAuth call. And the first time you launch it, you would log in. And the next time you launch it, it would just remember. And we can present then information right out of the gradebook, or we can show attendance data, or whatever that data is. So if your gradebook or student information system supports that, you could absolutely write a little widget that lets us log in and get to that data. The flip side is also true. And let me show this also. So there is an API that allows us to request information, to basically log into a FirstClass server with a legitimate username and password, and then request information from that logged in session. So what we're looking at here, this is another widget. Really, this is intended as a developer tool, but this is something that Stuart provided so that developers can begin working with the FirstClass API. And the first thing I need to do is come back here and log out. I want to go ahead and show a clean login on that other system. So from the API, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to log in. And what we're doing is we are sending a JSON query. In fact, this right here is the string that gets sent to FirstClass. So FirstClass Web Services receives this JSON query. And what it does is it takes this and it processes the data. You can see in this query, we're telling it this is a user ID of demo. We've got this SHA-512 hash that we're sending. And this is basically the username and password in some encrypted encoded mechanism. And what Web Services does is it sends back this string here. And this basically is returning somehow or another in all of this code. This is saying, yes, this is considered an acceptable login. And it's sending back a bunch of data about the session. And what we're seeing at the bottom is this is how Stuart has chosen to take elements of that data and present it. So after somebody logs in using this JSON post command, we might return to them this kind of data here. Where we're saying, okay, you're logged into this server, and this is how long you've been logged in, and so forth. And what's cool about this is once you've logged in, once you've authenticated to FirstClass with that first query, then we can begin executing other queries. So for example, I can send a query that says, now that we're connected, go ahead and show me everything on the desktop of this particular user. So again, the API tool is showing us, here's the request that we send to the web server. Here's the response from the web server. And again, JSON, it's a way of structuring data. It's not unlike XML, but a little bit easier to work with. And so you can see that it's returning to me a bunch of different objects and attributes for those objects. And this would include things like what is the icon and what's the title of each icon and so forth. And in this example, Stuart chose to present all of the desktop items, one item per row. And you can see he's presenting the icon, and it's even giving us the unread tracking for that object. And it makes it really easy now to build, for example, something in a web portal that would allow us to go out and retrieve a section of content from FirstClass. And in terms of supported items, you can see we can go in and we can expose the pulse. So here are all of the items that were visible through the pulse, or that would be visible to this particular end user through the pulse. And it's all done just by sending sending this JSON query and then getting back the data and parsing it out using JavaScript and CSS. So some very cool stuff, particularly for those of you that are interested in development, some very exciting opportunities, I think.